Peeni Henare, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe e te hea. Kia ora. Sir, in opening my contribution, I want to start with some general comments before I delve deeper into some of the interpretations and explanations that some of my colleagues have already covered. I want to go a little bit further into some of those and perhaps offer my perspectives on them. Sir, for the most part, I believe, and certainly this side of the House believes, that this bill actually fails to provide security of Māori land, the retention of Māori land. More importantly, sir, it fails to empower our people to utilise their Māori land. And I pick up the point made by my tuakana Pita Paraone with regard to the fact that resourcing is an important part to address the 22 years of struggle that Māori people have held with regard to their land. I say 22 years of struggle, sir, because I believe before we're able to move on into a better bill, a more robust bill, it's important that we address first and foremost the issues that have been faced by our people over the past 22 years and do it meaningfully. I understand the advisors and the panel took a principled approach towards their consultation on this bill, asking instead of what the problems are, they were asking how can we make things better for you. And I don't believe, sir, that this addresses the issues that were faced by Māori landowners over a number of years. Sir, I want to get straight into Section 8 and the term descent relationships determined by tikanga Māori. I've heard a mixture of responses to the use of tikanga in legislation throughout this particular debate, and I have indeed in many bills that have come through this House in my short time here, sir. But this particular one, and I've made my point very clear, I'm not a fan of tikanga Māori being used in legislation because of some of the reasons already mentioned by my colleagues about interpretation, about true intent, tikanga tangata, tikanga wairua, all of these other issues that raise more questions than answers, sir. In this particular part, descent relationships determined by tikanga Māori, 8, it says, 8.1, this section applies to provision of parts 1 to 9 that depends on there being a relationship of descent between people, such as a provision that refers to A, a child, grandchild, brother, sister, parent, grandparent, whānau or descendant, or B, an association with land in accordance with tikanga Māori. Sir, it's no secret the number of Māori who currently live in Australia. Under my understanding of tikanga, I'd argue that once ahi ka is lost, according to tikanga, it is whenua mātau. The land is cold. There is no ability for that person to go back there. Why? Because they gave up their right. They gave it up. That's tikanga. That's what tikanga tells me. Now I wonder how that argument would go down, sir, in the kāinga of the Māori people in Australia. I wonder how that discussion would go down even interstate here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where for many whānau, they don't actually live in their homeland. In fact, recent statistics say that only 13% of Ngāpuhi actually live in Ngāpuhi. Only 13%. So under tikanga, one could argue, if they were of this particular mind, to say that, well, when they moved to Auckland, we are now 4 generations into whānau being in Tāmaki Makaurau, they now have given up their right of ahi ka, which now whenua mātau. And then it links to the arguments made by my colleagues here that you get the small shareholders being ignored, or even worse, you get the tail wagging the dog, whereby the small shareholders are looked to have a bigger say in the development or the administration of land, sir. So those are important issues. And where do we base this kind of tikanga from? I tell you, sir, my interpretation of this when I consider tikanga actually goes back to the time of our tūpuna. And in the previous bill, sir, we discussed Te Rarawa. And for those who know that, sir, Mr. Chair,
Henare.
thank you, sir.
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. The time has come for me to report progress.
Members, the House is resumed. Mr. Chairman.
Mr Speaker, the committee considered the Appropriation 2015-16 Confirmation and Validation Bill and reports progress. The committee has further considered the Fire and Emergency New Zealand Bill and reports it with amendment. The committee has also further considered the Maori Purposes Bill and reports it with amendment. The committee has also considered Ture Whenua Māori Bill and reports progress. Mr Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
Members, the question is the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. Those against no. The ayes have it. The Appropriation 2015-16 Confirmation and Validation Bill is set down for further consideration in committee next sitting day. The Fire and Emergency New Zealand Bill and the Maori Purposes Bill are set down for third reading next sitting day, and the Ture Whenua Māori Bill is set down for further consideration in committee next sitting day. Members, the House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.